The final week of the regular season, judgment week for a lot of teams, who's in and who's out of the playoffs. Corway looking to make the run of a lifetime towards the wild card, but with Turnback having just as much a reason to play, who would end up squandering whose momentum? Missing the playoffs would be bad, but getting to play the relegation match would be even worse. Who wins the dogfight between Kitakami and Lava Ridge Town? Undella and Snowbell City both looking to avoid the wild card. Which MVP candidate would make the bigger statement in a huge Sapphire League clash? Sicily's been down all season, but they have a big chance to ruin Kaskarafa's season. The final week of the regular season, Wonder Room coming up next. Wonder Room is brought to you in part by Booze Mobile and by Kurtz's Chicken. And now for your host, King Vasser. Hello everybody and welcome back to NWBA Wonder Room. The regular season has now concluded. We are 6 weeks through. All the grit and the grind and the hard work that these teams have put in have finally come to pass. We now know who is in the playoffs, which Mons put their stamp on the season and look to be all-star contenders. And now the excitement really begins because this is where things are really going to matter. And as a result of the anticipation of the playoffs, we are going to run things a little bit differently. Normally we start with the standings and such, but that would give away a lot of the suspense of this episode. So we are going to switch it up in terms of the order and the format of which this episode is going to run. For the final week of the regular season stats leaderboard, a familiar face finds itself on top once again. It's Iron Crown coming in with 17 KOs. Volcanion of Kitakami putting up 11. Kirin putting up 10. And three separate Mons, Crawdaunt of Moss Deep, Dragonite of Corway, and Caesar and Umdella putting up 9 each. 9 was also the most assists put together this week via Cleavor of Snowbell City, Hippowdon of Legacy putting up 7, Gastrodon and Glamora of Undella and Snowpoint putting up 6 apiece, and then Clefable of Kaskarafa, Fortress of Blackthorn, and Wheezing G of Turnback putting up 5 each. Iron Crown also led the league in points with 31, a sizable lead on the rest of the field. Volcanion with 19, Dragonite and Kirin with 18, and then Dragapult of Dreamyard and Hippowdon putting up 17. As far as points per game and KOs per game, Hoopa Unbound of Legacy led in both, 7 points per game and 3.5 KOs per game. Torterra of Corway was second in both categories with 6 points per game and 3 KOs per game. Regidrago of Snowbell posted 5.3 points per game. Gargasalt of Moss Deep with 5 and Dragonite with 4.5. And for KOs per game, Gargasalt and Regidrago both putting up 2.7 and Dragonite coming in 5th with 2.3. We said back in week 3 that we would get back to the league leaders at the end of the season. Well, the end of the season is here, and as you can see, a lot of things have changed since the last time we were here. Iron Crown regained its lead on the throne and did it in a major way. 61 KOs, dominating the rest of the field. No other Mon even got to 50. Thunderous T came in second with 48. Sinistra racked up 46 for third, and Volcanion and Regidrago tied with 45. Hippowdon finished as the assist leader on the season, 39. Very strong season for Hippowdon. Iron Treads came in second with 36. Didn't really do much after it was acquired by Blackthorn as far as assists went, but still good enough to be second over the entire league. Glamora finished in third with 33. Samurai H putting up 28. And Toxapex putting up 26. As far as total points, Iron Crown dominated the field with 106, joining that very coveted 100-point club. Regidrago came in second with 82, again really ramping things up in that back half of the season. Hippowdon's fantastic season both offensively and defensively ended up getting it 79 points, good for third. Great Tusk coming in fourth with 78, and Thunder's T right behind it with 77. As far as the per game leaders, The chaos per game and points per game leaderboard look downright identical outside of the number 5 spot. Reggie Drago leads the league in both with 3.7 points per game and 2.0 KOs per game. Iron Crown came in second with 3.5 and 2.0. Venusaur and Blastoise coming in third and fourth respectively with 3.3 and 1.8, and then 3.2 and 1.7. Again, Critical not playing at all in weeks 5 and 6 meant that the per game numbers for those two mons stayed the same. Lycanroc, which was formerly of the Blackthorn Razorfangs, now a free agent, finished with 2.7 points per game, which is good for 5th in the league. And Salamence of the Snow Point Ceaseless Edgers finishes in 5th with 1.5. As far as assists per game, Yuxi once again finishing tops in the league with 1.2, much like it did last season. Iron Treads, Glamora, and Cleavor of Snowbell City all finishing with 1.1. And then Rotom Heat, formerly of Coral Way, finishing the season as a free agent, finished with 1 in total per game. As far as games played, Volcanion finishes the season as the sole Iron Man of the league, finishing with 46 total games played. Hippowdon and Rotom Wash both put up 45, so Hippowdon once again a very crucial part of Legacy's ability to have such a successful season, having that many assists, that many points, and playing in as many games as it could. Rotom Wash of Cascarafa was a big part of why that team made it to the playoffs, as well as a very strong defensive presence. Tornadus T of Pursuit finishes with 44, as well as Caesar of Undella, Porygon 2 of Snowbell City, and Capraja of Lava Ridge Town. Again, it makes sense that the more defensive mons are the ones that play the most games because they are good enough defensively that they can hold up against virtually any offense you throw at them. As far as total deaths, though, you're going to see a lot of these same mons as well. Capraja led the league with 42, meaning out of the 44 games it played, it only managed to see the end of the game twice. Volcanion coming in second with 40. Gudra of Cascarafa coming in with 36. Hatterene of Mossdeep with 35. And then Politoed, also of Lava Ridge Town, coming in with 33. As far as matches banned, Zamazenta H actually finished as the ban leader in Season 6 with 13 total. Kyurem, Dragapult, and Gargasalt all finished with 11. Makes sense. 2 of those are Terra Captains, and one of them is a Mon that is so good that it has been suspect tested multiple times throughout the NWBA's history, so it makes sense that they are able to rack up double-digit bans, as well as Iron Valiant of Blackthorn, Gouging Fire of Kitakami, and Darkrai of Undella coming in with 10. As far as KDA is concerned, Blastoise led the league at 6.0, didn't change because Blastoise didn't play at all in the back half of the season, so it ends up being the KDA leader in the league. The aforementioned Lycanroc came in at 4.5. Torkoal of Fuchsia City came in with 4.43. Again, Critical not playing in the back half of the season essentially explains that. Reggie Drago's masterful season that will likely end up in another MVP also put up a 4.3 KDA ratio, and then Hippowdon of Legacy with a 4.3 as well, which is almost unprecedented for a mostly defensive mon. So again, congratulations to Hippowdon for that good of a season. As far as usage rate is concerned, Iron Hands led the league with a whopping 42%, which we believe is an NWBA record. We're going to have to go back and check on that, but it certainly is more than any mon had in Season 5. Volcanion coming in second with 36, and then a trio of Lava Ridge Town teammates, Caparaja, Barraskewda, and Latios coming in with 36, 35, and 32% respectively. Bookending the season as Ruby League Pokemon of the Week, Iron Crown takes the award in Week 6 like it did in Week 1. Nowhere near as dominant performance as it had the last time it was up here, but still 17 KOs and 31 points were good for best in the NWBA over the week. It's 4.4 points per game, was second in the Ruby League, and it had a very strong 5.7 KDA. This has been essentially the best offensive mon from bell to bell after I got out to that super hot start in the beginning of the season. It was barely ever overtaken as far as points and KOs are concerned, and is going to be a big reason for whether or not Pursuit is able to make a playoff push or not, based on how this Mon does in the playoffs when the time comes. Make its first career appearance for Pokemon of the Week, it's Dragonite of the Koroway Workers, winning in the Sapphire League in Week 6. 9 KOs, was tied for first among all Sapphire League competitors, while its 18 points was standalone first in the Sapphire League. 4.5 points per game and 2.3 KOs per game, both good for third in the Sapphire League. Dragonite only played in 2 sets, but it was very dominant in one of them in particular. Almost was enough to get Koroway into the playoffs, and because of how quiet things were around the rest of the Sapphire League, even though it is not the most compelling case that we've ever seen for Pokemon of the Week, it was certainly good enough to earn it in this case. A final look at the MVP ladder before the All-Star voting ballots are counted show quite a lot of movement and a new favorite in both leagues. In the Ruby League, Iron Crown resumes its dominance, going back to number 1 on the poll, jumping over the rest of the field thanks to its strong Week 6 performance. It's the only Mon that will finish the season with 100 or more points, so it is extremely likely to win the MVP. In the Ruby League, Hippowdon and Iron Treads jump up to 2 and 3 respectively, jumping over Samurott H, which was very quiet this week, and Mewsting put at number 5. Over in the Sapphire League, Regidrago is now the clubhouse leader. It had a strong Week 6, very similar to how it did in Season 5. It really turned up the heat in the back half of the season, and so it is likely going to win its 3rd career MVP in NWBA history as a result of that. Sinister, though, has a very compelling case, dropping down to number 2, but was the MVP ladder leader in Weeks 4 and 5, so we would not be surprised to see that Mon end up snagging the award. Thunder's Tea drops down to 3, and Great Tusk drops down to 4 as a result of being jumped by Regidrago, and for Alligator, which did not see action this week, stays put at number 5 thanks to its dominance before Critical's disappearance, so to speak, during the back third of the season. The final ZU moment of the week for the regular season is a tale that you have actually heard before. We've talked all season about teams making mental mistakes before games, between games, as far as team building, bringing the band Mon, things of that nature. But this is week 6. This is the part where all of the BS has to stop. Teams really have to lock in and focus. Kasparov and Blackthorn, 2 teams that have a lot to play for in week 6. Kasparov trying to make the playoffs, Blackthorn trying to get out of the wild card and put themselves as a top 3 seed in the Ruby League. Now, this was a pretty solid set. Both teams won a game apiece to start, so we go to game 3, and Blackthorn brings the completely wrong team. Kasparov takes the game, as is their right, meaning that Kasparov wins the set. Again, it bears mentioning, this is week 6. We are at the end of the season. Making a mistake like that is absolutely brutal. And what makes it worse, if you look at the standings here, this quite literally determined so much for both of these teams. Kasparov, had they lost this set, would not have made the playoffs over Koroway. And if Blackthorn had won the set, they would have been the 3 seed in the Ruby League instead of Hearthome. So for Jade to just completely make a boneheaded error at this juncture in the season, without their coach, mind you, given their spat with Muffin and with the 2 parting ways last week, you just hate to see these type of things happen, but you just have to be better about it again this late in the season. But this is the price you have to pay. We'll see if it comes back to hurt Blackthorn in the long run, or if they're going to be able to overcome this adversity. And if you're Kasparov, well, sometimes it's better to be lucky than to be good. Now let's get to the serious stuff. The set highlights for the final week of the NWBA regular season. Of course, every team aspires to win. That's why you sign up to play in the NWBA, but that doesn't come easily to every team. And when you get to week 6, you have some teams that are playing for the playoffs and some teams that simply are trying to avoid the relegation match. And we had a good handful of teams doing more than one in the final week of the regular season. Corway and Turnback both on the precipice of being in the playoffs. For Turnback, they came into the week as the 5 seed in the Ruby League. For Corway, they came into the Sapphire League as the 6 seed. So for Corway, it was imperative to get all of their wins to maybe have an outside shot at making the playoffs. And for Turnback, it was important to get as many wins on the week as possible to avoid slipping below Snow Point and missing it entirely. For Kitakami and Lava Ridge Town, 2 teams that realistically didn't have a good shot at making the playoffs, but weren't out of the woods as far as the relegation match is concerned, both of them desperately needed to get wins on the week to avoid having to play in that and potentially lose a chance at applying for Season 7. For Andella and Snowbell City, 2 of the top 3 teams in the Sapphire League, the 1 seed up for grabs, Andella could finish anywhere between the 1 and the 5. So for them, getting a big upset on King would not only help them avoid being in the wildcard round, but also serves as just a tune-up for the playoffs and knowing what you're going to have to expect when the best of the best bring their best in a format where once you lose, you're done. And for Sicily and Cascarafa, the 5 seed in the Sapphire League, as long as they can tread water, they'd be able to hold on to a playoff spot. And for Sicily, who came into the week far and away the worst team in the league, there's nothing really to play for, right? Unless you're playing for spoilers, and they were certainly going to have to try to bring their all to take down a team that has the playoffs in their sights. Corway and Turnback, 2 teams looking to start off their very important weeks with a big win. And early on, Ursaluna, you knew this was going to present a problem to a team very weak to ground, but Z comes prepared, and Empoleon's got the Shuka, gets big damage off on Ursaluna, and before it goes down to a Primarina Moonblast, is able to get off some Stealth Rocks. Later on, everyone behind screams, hits a high horsepower on an incoming Petron, but it's only doing 29%, and this was the big story of this matchup. Petron proving to be a lot more annoying for Wheezy to deal with than for Wheezy to be able to use his ground type moves and take down Z's team. So Ursaluna and Reverboom both go down to Pecharunt fairly quickly in this battle, and so does Wheezing G. So now you get to turn 22, Primarina has to come in, it takes a Malignant Chain, and while it's doing a lot of damage back with Surf, it's not able to get the KO on Pecharunt before it goes down to a Shadow Ball. So down to just Slitherwing and Bronzong, Pecharunt has done a lot of the damage to this team, and even though it finally goes down to a Slitherwing Earthquake, it doesn't take much for Quillfish H to come in, do big damage to Bronzong on a crunch, and we just gotta concede the game. So we move to game 2, where Weezy's in a much better position, gets some good damage off on Pecharunt early, takes it down with a high horsepower on turn 6. So Weezy's in a much better position in game 2. But a few turns later, Z brings Latias in, going for the Calm Mind sweep. Weezy's got to go into Primarina and hope that it can deal enough damage to this thing before it blows through its team. But a critical hit is more than enough damage. Latias goes straight down, so now Z is going to have to try to play super hyper offensively. Cinccino comes in, tidies up, and gets rid of Primarina after a tail slap. But that won't end the battle for sure. Turn 23, Quillfish gets a big crunch on Reverboom, but now that it's Terra Grass, it goes down to the Gunk Shot. Hitmontop comes in to revenge KO with the Sucker Punch, but Wheezy's still with an advantage. Then Raikou comes in on Empoleon, lives easily, gets a KO off on Cinccino. Slitherwing comes in. Wheezy knows he's got to sack something, just gets off a little bit of damage before Slitherwing goes down to the toxic damage. But with Raikou able to come in, Calm Mind up once, and easily take care of Empoleon and Hitmontop, it's a good answer back for Turnback, who again comes in as the 5 seed in the Ruby League, so they need as many wins as they can possibly get. A little bit of playing around here near the end of the game, knowing that Hitmontop has Sucker Punch and using the opportunity to scout the rest of its moves before Weezing G is able to clean up with the Strange Steam. So we move to game 3 early on. Weezy pivots out with Raikou into Ursaluna, who's in on the Quillfish, smartly terras and then gets off the Pain Split, lives the Facade. You rarely ever see a Mon take that little from a Guts boosted Facade from Ursaluna, and even though Quillfish goes down, it gets off a lot of damage on Ursaluna, and Cinccino is able to come in and revenge kill with the Bullet Seed. Turn 16, Revavroom gets off a high horsepower on Petrarunt, but the Rocky Helmet really complicating matters for this Mon. Petrarunt gets yet another KO. So now, Weezy back on the back foot, but Raikou able to get off a Calm Mind and a big crit with the Shadow Ball on Petrarunt. Gets hit with the Malignant Chain and Poison, but it's going to be able to break through Confusion, get off the T-Bolt, and the biggest defensive issue goes down. But Hitmontop able to KO right back with Sucker Punch, and Weezy's on the back foot again. Turn 31, Cinccino is in, and Weezy, with most of his defense on the back foot, is going to go down to 2 tail slaps from Cinccino, and from here, it's looking pretty rough for turn back. Hitmontop comes in on the Slitherwing, doesn't take much of anything from the first impression. It does go down thanks to the crit on the CC, but Cinccino, who is faster, can come in, and because Slitherwing has lower defenses, it goes down to a tail slap. Primarina, you already know this thing is slower, it goes down to a Bullet Seed, and Crowway scores yet another big upset, moves to 6-13 on the season. Don't look now, but Z has an outside shot of making the playoffs if they're gonna continue playing like this. Petrarunt and Cinccino contributing for 11 of those KOs. Turn back falls to 10-9-1 on the season. Kitakami and Lava Ridge Town, 2 teams have a very slim chance of making the playoffs, and truthfully are just trying to avoid having to play in the relegation match. As you can see, Lava Ridge Town is rocking the rain, but Kitakami's got a good counter in their hands. The Specs rain boosted Volcanion Steam Eruption is going to put a hole in anything that gets in its way. But Latios able to answer back with some Lesser Purges on the Quagsire to make it 5-5. Then Mimikyu reads the superpower from Enamorus and then is able to get off a Play Rough and then a Shadow Claw to take down Mesprit, so Zach with an early 5-4 lead. Then CJ going for a few Play Roughs with Enamorus. You can tell that this thing is scarfed. It goes down to a Politoed Ice Beam, but now Volcanion is here to even the score. Latias goes down, Slowking G comes in, it has to go down to a Steam Eruption. At this point, you're just hoping for Volcanion to get paralyzed, but it's not working. Mimikyu goes down to a Steam Eruption, now it's up to Barraskewda. It doesn't KO with a close combat, but Zach gets lucky. Volcanion gets parried. It goes down to the second CC, but CJ is going to be able to answer back with a priority move that he doesn't press. Breloom goes down to the Barraskewda, and then as Arcanine H comes in, he Terra Normals, but goes for a Head Smash instead of an E-Speed. So Politoed is able to get sacked. Barraskewda's faster liquidation gets the KO, and Zack steals game 1 out from under CJ's feet. On to game 2, a paralyzed Cabraja has to sit there and hold the flamethrower from Volcanion. Then Mesprit able to get off a T-Wave and some rocks on Latios before going down to the Lesser Purge. Breloom comes in. The big CC, you can tell this thing is banded. Latios goes down. Later on, Mimikyu in on Arcanine, has to take a Head Smash. Disguise goes down, and it reveals its red card, which is bad for Zach. And Enamorus able to get the KO with Iron Head, so a pretty poor turn of events. Volcanion comes in on Politoed and gets frozen. But Zach, not realizing Steam Eruption is an automatic thaw, and Barraskewda gets melted in the rain. And it's not too much longer before Slowking G and Politoed have to stare down this menace. And CJ is going to be able to answer back in a massive way in this game 2 to even the set, thanks to this Volcanion. On to game 3. Some feeling out at the start. Breloom tries to stay in. Zach reads he's going to press another button, gets the KO with Luster Purge. But you know that this Volcanion is going to come in eventually. Kilowattrel comes in, it gets blown up by a Steam Eruption. Latios comes in with a Luster Purge, and it's not enough to KO, so Volcanion picks up another KO. And then later on, Politoed, asleep in front of this thing, wasn't able to get the KO with Ice Beam, so it has to be sacked for Barraskewda to clean up on Volcanion. Later on, Mimikyu gets the Disguise busted, and Enamorus is in again, and you know what's going to happen. Iron Head, but it doesn't get the KO. So Mimikyu is going to be able to get off some good damage on Enamorus before it goes down. Turn 23, Mesprit U-turns out on Copper Raja is able to get a big Iron Head off on CJ, and he goes for the Defog instead of trying to deal some damage to this thing or maybe set up anything else. Arcanine is going to be able to come in, get the KO with the Flare Blitz, but it goes down to liquidation. Mesprit goes down to a liquidation, and with no way of dealing enough damage to this Barraskewda, the unanimous player of not enough, Skewda's going to be able to steal game 3, so Lava Ridge Town is going to be able to escape with the dub despite Locanion's monstrous 11 KO performance. Kitakami officially eliminated from the playoffs. Lava Ridge Town getting their first win since week 3 and still barely alive in the Sapphire playoff race. Undella and Snowbell City, perhaps the biggest matchup of the week. The number 2 and number 3 seeds in the Sapphire League coming into the week. It was a very slow first game until Thunderous T was able to open up the winning and the killing with the Thunderbolt on Cleavor. Then turn 26 Necrozma is able to come in. Photon Geyser Porygon 2. King tries to call him out, doesn't fake out, ends up having to sack Ambipom. Azu finally gets the revenge kill with Aqua Jet, but it's a big lead for Audi. Thunderous T able to come in, clean up on the Azu, cleans up on the Chandelure, and you know Alomomola is not going to be able to live this. So it was a slow-paced game, but Audi able to take the first game easily. But game 2, King makes a very crucial swap to Regidrago. Cleavor opens up game 2, getting off a few Stone Axes before going down to the Iron Head. But the problem is here, and Audi's got no Fairy type. So Regidrago is going to be able to pick up a KO on Skarmory. And really, this was just a matter of finding opportunities for Alomomola to come in, get off a pivot, and get a KO with Regidrago. Turn 13, Audi trying to reverse his fortune, goes into Necrozma, gets off a Dragon Dance, gets a big Photon Geyser off on Alomomola, and goes for the KO. Ambipom's going to have to get some fake out chip, but he's still got to sack something else to Necrozma. So in comes Porygon 2. It takes 73% from the Photon Geyser, so it's not going to be able to live the second one. But Ambipom's finally going to be able to come in and get this demon out with a fake out. So in comes Gastro. It has to take a triple axle. It's able to live, so Ambipom goes down, but the team is weakened, so Regidrago is going to be able to come right back in and clean up this game. Gastro goes down. Caesar doesn't even go for Bullet Punch. It goes down. Darkrai is scarfed, but it's not going to get the flinch on Dark Pulse, so it goes down. King takes game 2 convincingly. Game 3, Chandelure reads Gastrodon on the switch, pops it with an Energy Ball, and now we have to play this game again where something's going to have to go down to a Scarf Dragon Energy. This Terra Dragon boosting that move to unfathomable levels, and with, again, no Fairy type on this roster, there's nothing Audi can really do to stop this onslaught. Once the Mon is in, something's got to get sacked, and either Caesar or Darkrai is going to have to come back in to threaten it out. And again, Alomomola, because of how bulky this thing is, can take any hit, flip turn right back out to Drago. And so what looked like what was going to be a signature win for Audi and Undella this late in the season ends up turning into a nightmare between Chandelure and Regidrago. King and Snowbell City's offensive output was just too much to handle, and with just Darkrai against the entire team and only doing 20-ish% to this Porygon 2, it's only a matter of time before Audi's gonna have to concede defeat. And so Snowbell City getting a monstrous win against a big Sapphire League contender, moves to 14-7. Undella now sits at 10-10 and is now in big risk of having to play in the wild card match. Sicily and Kasparova ended up being one of the last matches of the regular season being played. Lot on the line here. If Kasparova loses, they will miss the playoffs. Slitherwing really not having anything to play for. They're going to have to be in that relegation match. But they still have an opportunity to cause a massive upset. But early on, it's Kasparova making some big plays. Gengar using Destiny Bond to take down Milotic on the swap. And then Shaman able to live a Flamethrower and KO Hydreigon back with the Dazzling Gleam. In comes a Mungus that's been causing problems for this team defensively, but 2 Air Slash flinches is going to be a problem solver in and of itself. So turn 30, it was a bit slower pace, but Kasparov able to get off to a lead. Iron Hands revenge KO Shaman after taking an Earth Power, but in comes Excadrill, and with 3 Mons weak to Earthquake, in the back, you know what time it is. Arcanine goes down. Keg oddly sacks Clefable to an Iron Hands Heavy Slam, but it's not going to matter. Excadrill just wanting to get that drop off, takes out Iron Hands, takes out Golden Go, and wins the first game convincingly. On to game 2. Rodom gets a switch off on Amoonguss early. In comes Gengar, hits a big Sludge Wave, but it's only doing 33%. And then the second foul play crit, so Gengar not able to use his Destiny Bond shenanigans again. Then on turn 20, Clefable comes in. Good read from Flare. It goes down to a Heavy Slam. Turn 41, again, back with the slower pace. Keg is able to get a read on Amoonguss. Gets the KO with Flamethrower. In comes Hands. Something's got to go down. Shaman goes down to a Supercell Slam. Excadrill comes back out to threaten this thing, but the Earthquake only at 73%, and so it goes down to a Drain Punch. Iron Hands, the only real saving grace on this roster, but putting in a lot of work here in this set with an opportunity to send Kasparov home. Then Milotic able to deal enough damage to Goodra to take it out, and with just Rotom Wash left, there's nothing that Keg can really do to win. It's on the timer thanks to Toxic. It gets a KO on Milotic thanks to the Volt Switch, but Golden Go's going to be able to come in, easily take a Hydro Pump, gets the KO back with Shadow Ball, and now Sicily on the verge of winning their 4th set of the season and taking Kasparov out entirely. Game 3, Clefable finally gets a good swap in on Iron Hands, but doesn't do nearly enough damage back with the Moonblast, so now Keg is in an early hole again. Turn 8, Goodra gets off a Draco Meteor on Golden Go to pop the balloon, but again, that Amoonguss causing a lot of problems thanks to that Toxic, and even the Goodra Flamethrower not nearly enough to take out Golden Go. It goes down after Shadow Ball and Toxic. So in comes Excadrill. Keg realizing that he's got to make a play now, goes for the Swords Dance on the Golden Go recover. So Arcanine has to go down to an EQ. Later on, Keg utilizing Swagger Mirror once again with Entei takes a lot from the foul play, and with this thing being Terra Water, it's not going to do nearly enough with the Sacred Fire. 49% is still great, but thanks to the toxic damage, Entei is going to go down. But crucially, Keg making the calculations in his head, realizing that by forcing Amoonguss to Terra Water, it now loses to Shaman. So after a Seed Flare and an Earth Power, Amoonguss goes down. We've already seen this interaction, and even a crit Flamethrower is not enough to take Shaman out. So now Keg has flipped the momentum back over to his side. Milotic comes in on a big Volt Switch later on. Excadrill is able to come in, gets the KO with Earthquake, and with just Hands and Golden Go left on this roster, Excadrill is going to be able to pick up the victory. And so Kasparov gets to move on to make the playoffs at 9-13. Excadrill and Shaman, big reason in this last set of the season for them. And Sicily put forth their best effort, but they will unfortunately end the season on a 12-set losing streak, finishing at 3-19. Being that it is the final week of the regular season, it makes sense that this week's episode was going to be lighter on sections anyway. There are no roster moves to decide. Playoff scenarios didn't matter because we would show you the standings, and that will let you know who is actually in the playoffs. So let's not waste any more time. The wait is over. Now we can unveil who is going to be competing for a championship in the NWBA in Season 6. So, at the end of it all, Legacy, of course, the 1 seed as everybody expected, finishes 20-2, now the 5th team in NWBA history to win 20 or more games in a season, meaning that every season it is possible to win 20 or more games. It has happened by one team. Pursuit emerges as the clear number 2. They were in that mess with Heart Home and Blackthorn for a while, but they went undefeated on the week and emerged as the clear second best team in the Ruby League. Both Heart Home and Blackthorn struggled with 1 in 3 weeks, but it was Heart Home, thanks to that game count tiebreaker, that emerges as a 3. So Blackthorn having to play in the wild card round. Turnback finished 3-1 thanks to forfeit losses via Kitakami and Heart Home. So Turnback ends up being the number 5 seed in the Ruby League. Pretty unfortunate for Snowpoint, who had a solid week, just at the end of the day, it was not enough to pass up Turnback. And so despite a very solid 12-10 season, they find themselves out of the playoffs. Kitakami and Sicily both finished 0-4 on the week, and so they stand at 7-8 respectively. Over in the Sapphire League, for the first time all season, we have a new leader. Snowbell City finishes 15-7 after a 3-1 week. They are now the number 1 seed in the Sapphire League heading into the playoffs. Fuchsia City unfortunately had to forfeit this week's matches again, but thanks to the massive lead that they amounted up through week 4, their 12-10 record is still good enough to be the number 2 in the Sapphire. Dreamyard and Undella were scrapping it out for that number 3 seed, but Dreamyard, by virtue of going 2-2 in a week where Undella went 1-3, means that Dreamyard ends up being the 3 seed. That head-to-head victory over Undella proving to be the massive difference. Kaskarafa and Koroway ended up being the 2 teams fighting it out for that last wildcard spot. And despite the fact that Koroway won the head-to-head, Kaskarafa had a good enough week going 3-1 to finish 9-13 and snag that number 5 spot. So Koroway in a similar situation to Stillpoint, even though they had a fantastic week, Z finishing the season with 6 straight wins, it was not enough to get that final wildcard spot. Lava Ridge finishes 6-15-1 despite losing the head-to-head to Cyclone. They went 2-2 on the week and thus were able to avoid that dreaded 8th spot in the Sapphire League where Moss Deep City ends up occupying. And for the season's final set of power rankings, every team not named Legacy ends up moving a spot somewhere on the board. So it was a really hectic final week of the season. A lot of movement as far as seeding was concerned. So as the power rankings stand, Pursuit and Snowbell City move up to the number 2 and number 3 respectively. Hearthome, Blackthorn, and Fuchsia City fall to 4, 5, and 6 respectively. Turnback jumps up to 7 by virtue of getting into the playoffs. Dreamyard moves up to 8, Undella drops down to 9, and Kaskarafa jumps Snowpoint City by virtue of making the playoffs as well. Snowpoint down to 11, Koroway and Lava Ridge Town move up to 12 and 13, just as a reflection of them being able to fix up a little bit in the end of the season, despite not making the playoffs. Kitakami, Moss Deep, and Sicily drop down to 14, 15, and 16, respectively, after their poor finishes to the season. So, with all the dust settled on the regular season, we move to the Season 6 playoff bracket. The wild card matches, that best of 1 no-ban deathmatch that teams dread having to play. In the Ruby League, it's going to be Blackthorn and Turnback. Their first meeting was in week 2, where they did not actually play, and so it resulted in a draw. So their real first meeting came in week 5, when Blackthorn was able to 2-0 Turnback. That being said, a lot has changed since then, particularly the fact that Jade no longer has Muffin as a head coach, and it certainly showed in week 6 where Jade stumbled in most of their sets. So for Wheezy and his coach Mikey, this is an opportunity to be able to make the proper adjustments to catch a team that seems to be on the backswing and maybe take advantage of that and move on past the wildcard round. Over in the Sapphire League, you have Undella and Kaskarafa. Audi and Keg put together some real heaters during the regular season. Audi taking both of those sets, but both of them went to game 3. So it is very possible that Keg can make this happen. But again, best of 1 no bans. That wild card is so vicious to play against. It's almost a matter of guessing right in the team building stage than anything else. But we know that both of these two are keen to building some really crazy sets, so we're excited to see what they come up with in this playoff matchup. Obviously, Legacy and Snowbell City, as the respective 1 seeds in their leagues, get to wait on the winner of the wild card before having to think about what they need to do to move to Ruby and Sapphire finals respectively. But for the semi-final matches that have actually already been set up, In the Ruby League, you have Pursuit and Heart Home. Pursuit won their most recent matchup in Week 6 with a clean 2-0 victory, but they were 2-0'd by Heart Home in their first matchup in Week 3, so this is a really interesting one. Heart Home brought a lot of weird stuff to their matchup in Week 6. Is that a strategic move on Ballheat's part to avoid revealing any important information before the playoffs? Or is it a sign of things to come and that Heart Home is kind of slipping as far as team building is concerned in the back portion of the season? We shall see. It is certainly the highest profile matchup in the first 2 rounds among all teams. Over on the Sapphire side of things, you have Fuchsia City and Dreamyard. This one is probably the hardest to call. They only played one actual set, that coming in Week 2, where Fuchsia City won in 3 games. Since then, a ton has changed. Gear has completely flipped the switch from what the first half of the season looked like. Critical has not played a set since Week 4 due to outside factors. So we have no real idea which one of these teams is going to be able to come away with the win. We just know that it's going to be a dogfight, all things considered. Critical has been playing the close sets all season, and based on how Gear is playing, we would not be surprised if this one goes to Game 3 as well. And truth be told, all of these sets can realistically go the difference. It just is a matter of who is the most prepared heading into the playoffs. It feels like there's going to be a collision course between Legacy and Snowbell City. They just have been playing the best out of each respective team in each respective league. But that is not to say that it's going to be a smooth ride all the way there. We saw last season that neither of the 1 seeds in the Ruby and Sapphire leagues were able to make it to the NWBA finals. So you are going to have to go out there and earn every single win. And if nothing else, should shape up to be another exciting playoffs. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you all for watching. I've been your host, King Vasser. It's the All-Star Night. We've got best of the best in categories, Coach of the Season, Moment of the Season, and the All-Star rosters will finally be unveiled, and we can get the fun started before the playoffs take place. Don't go anywhere. A special edition of Versus Seeker coming up next.